So hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Great turnout. I'm really pleased to see how many people want to come and hear more about the Masters Academy. For those of you who don't know, I'm Ellen Sturgis. I'm chair of the select board. With me sort of co-hosting it, Lori Clark, chair of the planning board. You wave, Lori. And then Jesse Stedman and Malcolm Reagan, who are our planning department. And obviously Denise Dabrowski, our town administrator. Just a couple updates before we jump in. First, all the questions tonight, please use the chat, and then the co-host will be moderating the questions and sending them off to Peter at intervals so we can hopefully get to everything. If there's just so many questions by the end and we can't get to all of them before it gets too late, we'll figure out with Peter how to sort of follow up with answers afterwards. Also, as you might have just seen, we are recording the sessions for people who weren't able to make it tonight. I know there's a school committee meeting, if nothing else. Make sure people can see it who couldn't make it tonight. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over. This is an information session, just to be clear. I think it was in the posting, but just so everybody understands, it hasn't been formally proposed to the planning board yet. So this is not a public hearing. There's no big decision that has to be made tonight. This is really our chance to hear directly from Peter Masters about the program, about their plans, where they're at right now and what their vision is. So it really is a chance for everybody to listen and to ask questions. So encourage you all to think that way. If you don't want to send questions in tonight, but have them later, I would say send them on to Jesse and then he can forward them on to Peter afterwards. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter Masters, the president, the owner of Masters Academy. Peter, it's all yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Welcome to everyone. My brother Chris and I grew up in Lexington. We went to Boston College, played hockey at BC in the 90s. Finished playing, and we started our business, the Junior Bruins, out of the Marlboro rinks almost 20 plus years ago. About 5 years ago, we had seen a distinct shift in what parents were looking for as far as secondary education, different than the typical private school offerings that were out there all throughout New England. So Chris and I started a journey to kind of get to the point of where we are today. We knew we wanted to create a sports academy, grades 6 through 12 in PGs, in the image of the most successful sports academy in the world, which is IMG Academy down in Bradenton, Florida. We knew the hockey business inside and out, but did not know about schools, hiring teachers, construction, financial models, and everything that could possibly go into building an academy. So we spent a year and a half putting together what we think is a blue-ribbon team to bring our vision to fruition. We needed to start with getting involved with some folks who knew how to run a school in the vision of IMG. And we were lucky enough to get in touch with Rich Odell and Ted Meekma, who Rich had run IMG as the headmaster from 1999 to 2016. He grew the school from 12 students to over 1,100 students and oversaw a $165 million build out on over 300 acres of land in Bradenton, Florida. His partner, Ted Meekma, had started with Bolletary in the 70s in their academy, which is the infancy of IMG, and then spent 20 years running the academy side on the business side. So they were the perfect two people for us to partner with in bringing, a IMG North to the Marlboro area. We then went out and found the various other folks that you need to kind of go around it, architects, construction managers, owner project managers, all who had extensive experience with secondary schools and colleges. So a lot of folks in our team have worked on buildings and schools like Roxbury Latin or Phillips Exeter or Dexter, many of the colleges around. So we put a great kind of construction group together. And then we put our marketing team and have a couple Wall Street folks who have had 30, 40 years in raising money and building out financial models to give us the opportunity to bring our vision to the investment and banking community to help fund this. So that took a few years to get that group together. We've had a lot of twists and turns along the way. And when COVID hit, the world shut down, as we all knew. And we decided that this is a fantastic opportunity to look around the Marlboro, the rink here at 290 and 495 intersection, to see if there was a corporate campus or a school that might be shutting down or selling, kind of based on the new world, right? Where more folks were working from home, staffs were going down, people were consolidating. And last May, we were, extremely lucky to be told that there was a campus like that being sold in Stow. I'd gone over on a Tuesday to kind of investigate. Again, this is 3.5, 4 years into this process. So I knew exactly what we were looking for. And halfway through the tour of the building, I knew this was kind of nirvana for us. It set up fantastically to house the number of students we were looking for, which was ultimately a school's, again, grade 6 through PGs, about 600 students. It had the ability to allow us to refurbish it, to put in dorms. It had an industrial kitchen and a cafeteria that would suit all of our kind of school needs. It had plenty of acreage to add our fields to, and parking to go along with a lot of, what goes into the school. So tons of desks, chairs, AV systems. It had all the technology we could possibly want. So that was on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, we flew the whole team in from kind of all over the place. We took a tour that day. The group agreed that this was the best place that we had seen over our years. And we quickly moved and made an agreement with Bose to purchase their property. Over the last 6-7 months, we have done two things. We've diligenced the property, and we've spent a ton of time in it with our team, building out, specifically what we'd like to see on campus. Our school, different than kind of the traditional prep schools around here, offers 5.5 hours of academics each day, and then 3.5 hours a day of what we call a major. So at IMG, their majors are 8 sports. So we will have sports on the campus, starting with hockey, which we will educate, house, and feed at the Stow campus, but they'll bus over and play out of the New England Sports Center to start. We would build a few turf fields, baseball, softball, soccer, lacrosse, and we would start with lacrosse, soccer, and there's a building there that's perfect setup for a gym, and we would add basketball in as well. And we would start with around 200 students. The hope is for fall of 2023. We would like to get into the building this summer with the 12 months of kind of refurbishment and construction, and go from July to July, which will give us about 18 months to prepare everything we need, from marketing to hiring headmasters to teachers, and setting up all the vendors that we need to kind of hit the ground running in fall of 23. Also, our majors there are a few different majors that we have that are different than your typical sports academy. So we're going to add e-gaming to our offerings. So we'll build a state-of-the-art e-gaming center. Right now, e-gaming is the fastest growing sport in all of college. BU, Northeastern, Assumption all have new e-gaming scholarship teams, and there are 2 professional teams here in Massachusetts. So e-gaming would be a major for us. And then we also are adding pre-professional into it as well. So we looked at the jobs that 10 years out will be in high demand: drone, cybersecurity, robotics, coding, in medicine. So I might be a student that does 5.5 hours a day of academics, and I go to the hockey rink, and then another student's going to go to the e-gaming room, and the other one's going to go into the drone center. So we have a really good, diverse kind of offering for our group. We hope to have 220 students approximately in year one, and then grow over a 6-year period to around 620 students. We have enough room that we've laid out on the property, no new buildings, but in the main building, the 312,000 square feet that exist, to do 385 beds inside the school. It will be co-ed as well as our day students coming. So that is the overview of kind of our last 4 or 5 years and where we've got to, and kind of hopes for what this campus will transform into. I could go on for hours about every little nook and cranny of Masters Academy, but I'd like to open it up to questions now, and then I can share some of our slideshow as well as we move along to help answer some folks' questions.
So there are no questions yet, Peter. So you may want to start with the slides and see if questions come up as you move along.
Okay, great. Let me
No.
try this.
All right, so we actually just got one that, let me see. Oh, actually.
I was just going to suggest starting maybe with just the layout of the map, just to give people a sort of a visual of how it's going to
Sure.
look.
Sure. So is that working? Can you see my
Yep.
screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. So right here, right, the main building, 312,000 square feet. So that'll be the main school. The quad on the left will all be dorms for first floor and second. Second floor, we will install a sunroof to give more dorm space on the second floor versus the first. You move over to the building on the right. The entrance to the school would be here. We'd have admissions on the right and all our administration on the left. First floor of this building would be our actual school. And I'll show some drawings in a minute. Second floor would be all dorms, cafeteria on the left side. Out here, we have mapped out in what we call phase one, which would be 2 turf fields that can service softball, lacrosse, soccer, as well as baseball. So they're kind of combined turf fields. This building right here, we would convert into our gymnasium, 1 full basketball court going the long way so the folks can play their games, and then 2 basketball courts side to side for practice. Then in this space right here, we would look to create another turfed field that we could dome during this winter so the kids can compete and practice during the winter months. And that would be phase one. We've had, talk of their ability, space-wise to put more fields or some faculty housing here in the future, another field on this side, and maybe right in this little space here, we could build outdoor, it's like a baseball infield with batting cages covered. So it's more of a practice field and practice space. And then ultimately, if the basketball and volleyball or indoor sports grew, we're looking at kind of a phase 2 in this area to build out another Butler building where we could extend more of our gym space. But to start off, fall of 23, dorms, classrooms, administration, and admissions in this part of the building. It includes all the nooks and crannies you would need. It's got the nurses station. It's got full-time 24-hour security, all the laundry space in there. Also in this building, it have a basement as well, where we would have our performance center. So we've got our gym facility, indoor golf, pitching lanes, batting lanes, our robotics center, in our wrestling area. So I'll flip to that one. Spend a lot of time. So if you're looking here at the first floor, you can see that this has been really carefully thought out. Security, nurses facility, dorms, lounge space, faculty apartments. I believe there are 16 full-time faculty apartments in there, more dorm space, administration, school stored admissions. You have all your school space in here. And our program is a dual daily schedule. So we have an A and B schedule. Half of our students can be at their major while the other half are taking classes. And then after lunch, it flips. Those who are training would then go into school in the afternoon, and those who are in school would flip into training. So it allows us to double kind of the capacity of the normal space that would fit, in, it's 10, 12, 14 classrooms. You have the dining that already exists in the servery. We put a game room in for our boarders and day students that are kicking around after school, pool tables, darts, foosball, that type of stuff. You kick on to the second floor, and because we're able to put a skylight in, you now can have some dorm space in the middle. But you can see our dorms are 250 square feet, which are large for dorms. Everyone would have their own two-door room, one bath, one shower. They'd have their own space, plenty of room for laundry, more faculty apartments. And then again, as we move throughout the top of the building, you see with just more dorms and faculty space as well. And then our lower level, this is the basement of one of the quads. You have your speed and agility, your fitness centers, all your weights, sports medicine, our matted sports, e-gaming, pitching, batting, indoors, and our robotics center. So that's the layout that we're working with or hoping to work with for kind of day one. You can see here better representation of kind of how fields work. So there's the main building. This is a flipped from where we were looking kind of as the overview, but everything in the blue is what we're hoping to do for phase one. So you can see you get baseball, 2 soccer fields, lacrosse fields that could share, and softball here. And then this is our bubble domed soccer field as well. And you can see down the road, you have space for more fields, possible hockey rink or indoor, field house, and then our baseball training center. But as we're at today, this is the area where we'd like to do for kind of phase one, and then everything else is a possibility down the road. So I'll stop there in case any more questions have come in.
Yes, we do have questions. All right,
All right.
Let me get in here. So the first one was, despite the site's industrial zoning, it is located in a quiet residential neighborhood adjacent to homes, agricultural, and open space areas. In contrast to the daytime use of the adjacent park and the former daytime use of the Bose office space, the proposed academy would introduce a large 24-hour population to the neighborhood. Can you please speak to your initial thoughts on how to ensure the student population does not create a nuisance nighttime noise for nearby homes?
Sure. Well, I'd like to introduce Rich Odell, who is on the call. I'm sorry, I'm Denise, I'm throwing this at you. Are you able to find Rich and allow him to speak?
I will, oh, sorry, there's a lot of folks on here. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry to spring that on you.
That's okay. All right.
But Rich, for those while she's looking, Rich has over 40 years experience in running private schools, including IMG. I thought it's a good time to introduce him, and he can answer a lot of this school-specific questions.
So thanks, Peter, and nice to meet all of you on this call this evening. The question is a great one, and in terms of consideration for everyone who lives around the area. I will use IMG as the example where we had a piece of property much larger than this, but actually had a lot of housing on campus for families of the students who chose to have that as a second location, or they wanted to be closer to their kids and use that space. And we did not have any issues because the activities that involve the students are during the daylight hours. And if we're doing things in the evening, that is indoor activity and does not go on past 8 o'clock in the evening if there was something outdoors. The rare occasion would be if there was a baseball game that had extra innings or something, that might be running a little bit later than that. But our goal is with our academic model that these students, when they finish either their performance part of their day, their major, or the academic piece, they have dinner, and then there's 2 hours of study time that is supervised in the evening. And what they have is about a 45-minute window after that for their recreational time, all of which will be indoors. As Peter described where our dining area is, that's where we will have our movie theater space for kids to watch movies, or we'll have our ping pong, our pool tables, foosball, other things. There's a small cafe in there where kids can get snack food outside of the dining hours. Those activities will stay indoors for the most part. Outdoor activities might be kids going and using that beautiful trail to walk on that is around the campus if they wanted extra exercise. We're also talking about how we can make this campus really feel comfortable and part of the community, not simply isolated for the kids' activities. And so in our planning at this point, we're looking at having activities to bring the community on campus to experience some of the things that we are doing, participate in some of the programs, possibly doing other activities that the community would recommend, that given the space that we have, all of the parking we have, the fact that we've got a dining area that can seat 400 people, that we would like to be a good community partner moving forward. And we would hopefully not have any issues. If there were to be noise issues, those are things that, much like I've done at other institutions, be it IMG or other ones around the country, then we work very quickly to take care of that. But our students are intending to be respectful, intending to honor the needs of the community and the proximity of people who have young children potentially, or anyone who wants to go to bed at an earlier hour, that we are accommodating that and being very thoughtful of it. And if we weren't, then we would address that and make sure that it was taken care of quickly. These are not students typically who are interested in being outdoors and rambunctious or going off campus. Our security system will help ensure that that doesn't occur. They won't be wanderers around and off the property. That is part of their whole, of our policy and our procedures that we put in place in the agreement that they sign when they come on campus, that they are to respect the surrounding area, much as if it were their own home, and be respectful and hopefully be friendly to people should others be walking on campus, because we'd want to keep it open for that purpose, that we become part of the community and hopefully can be in some way helpful to the community that is neighboring to us, not simply the whole community or the whole town of Stow, which we would also be engaging with.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Peter, Rich, I'm not sure who will take this. There's some questions on the number of students. So can you talk about these resident and half-day students and or day students and how that will work?
Sure, Denise, am I still sharing my screen?
Yes, you are.
Can you see that? Okay, great. So here is our layout for how the school will grow in boarding versus day students. So fall of 23, we're projecting 237 students. That's our goal, 159 on in boarding and 78 day students. And then you see it grow each year, 333, 83. We will ramp up as we finish construction inside by year 2. So 24, 25, we'll have a fully built out facility. But this will give you an idea of kind of what the goal is over the 6 years, almost 7 years out from today.
Great. Can you talk about how much faculty you plan to have and staff members, and how many you expect might be living on campus?
Sure, Rich, go ahead.
Sure. So the only people living on campus will be those who are functioning as house parents. So our model is a little different than what some other of the New England boarding schools have had historically, in that we actually have 3 sets of adults who are there to nurture the kids on a daily basis. We have our academic faculty, which our student to adult to faculty ratio on the academic side will be 1 to 15. We have then the coaching staff, which is separate from those who are the academic instructors. And then we have our residential life staff. Those are the folks who live in the apartments that Peter mentioned earlier that surround each of the students. So for every 20 students, there is a house parent who lives in an adjoining apartment on that wing. And then the 4th group would be our security folks who are not overnight residents, but there is 24-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage at our primary exit areas. This is a fully cambered for facility cameras, so that we can see any location at any time. All of that information is recorded and kept for 30 days, so that if there is any issue of a student leaving for some reason or snuck out, that is tracked very quickly. And the key system that we use really also alerts us if any student is moving in an area where they're not supposed to be at a specific time in the building, i.e. the time when the students are supposed to be in their room, resting, sleeping, getting ready for the next day.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
What activities do you see taking place on the campus in the non-school months? Continuing use of the athletic facilities? And might you envision job opportunities for Stow's teen population over the summer months or after school hours during school if facilities are in use for sports?
It's a good question. So we plan to keep the property busy all year long. So with some added turf fields, we'd love to have some soccer or lacrosse, baseball tournaments that would take place on the weekends. It's not a massive facility, so this is not a huge tournament destination. 8, 10, 12 teams over the weekend playing in some games. We would like to run camps during that time as well. And, Rich has done a lot of this at the school he's working with now and in the past, some additional academic learning, right? So Rich, you might want to talk about what other programs you plan to offer here.
So in the afternoon and evening, programs such as the robotics piece or some of the visual imaging, the new kinds of professions that are out there, we will open the campus so that local area students who want to come and take any of those courses, participate in those programs, will have the opportunity to do that. We'll also make some of those programs available on weekends. If there are students who want to use the golf simulation facility, we will have times for that outside of when our kids are using them, so that there is a not exclusivity. We, at least in my career, I'm about inclusivity, not exclusivity, as a key component of building out a school like this. In my time at Northfield Mount Herman School, trying to do the same kind of methodology of engaging with the community to create a good sense that this is a great place to have because it's got a lot of resources. It permits and provides the opportunity for kids to come on campus from the community and participate in these different programs that we would offer. We're also likely to do culinary programs that could be open to students or open to adults. We have a full, magnificent commercial kitchen that we can utilize for those purposes outside of the normal eating hours for the students that are there. We also have, in terms of the esports facility that's downstairs in the as you're looking at it, the right quadrant. Those are areas where students who are interested in learning, not simply how to play esports, our methodology and our program will evolve into actually helping build programs, helping design, write the musical scores for them, do the scene production stuff for all of those kinds of games, but not just games that kids or adults play today. And more games are played actually by 21 to 28-year-olds on esports than they are by kids these days. But we will be developing learning tools that will make available to other institutions to help kids with learning using esport technology for that. As I mentioned, the robotics, hopefully partnering at other schools that I have right now, we're bringing together corporations and universities to help in building out what becomes a seamless transition for kids to go from a high school experience, such as what we offer, into and be better prepared for a workplace if that's where they choose to go. Google would be a good example of that, where today Google would prefer to hire high school graduates than they would people with four-year degrees in many of their areas, because these kids are at that cutting edge of learning and they've grown up with the technology and they're better prepared in some ways, not always, but in some ways to be beneficial to large technology companies. So our goal here is to prepare kids that have all different pathways to look at what their life might be and give them an opportunity to experience that. Our program is built on 5 pillars. Peter has mentioned 2 of them, which 5.5 hours a day of academics, 3.5 hours a day of your major. There is also a whole personal skill development curriculum where we every week have a different word that we introduce in the residence house on Sunday nights by a student who has done some research on that word. And then that becomes part of the academic curriculum in each of the subject areas. It becomes part of the training in the sport area and also just in their residential facility. The 4th pillar is our careers. And that's the program that takes a student, every student coming in, looks at what they want to be doing, potentially not playing their sport beyond college. That's often the case. These are not kids who are necessarily looking at the pro circuit. And many will come with that, but the reality is when they get in an environment like ours, similar to IMG, where you might have been in your town the top tennis player, but when you come to IMG and you're one of 250 tennis players from around the world, all of whom were the best in their town, or at least doing well, you realize that maybe your career will not be in tennis as a player. But again, talking about this career component, introducing students to sports psychology, sports medicine, sports rehabilitation, sports nutrition, other areas that they could potentially major in instead of playing the sport with us, that keeps them in the area where they have their passion, but also gives them the exposure to a much bigger opportunity as a career. So those elements all also will become part of what we provide to the community for those young people who are interested in it, and or adults who might want to learn about robotics because they're thinking about a second career or how to work with robots. And our robotic design program will not be similar to what schools are beginning to do, but we will be working with full-size robots as we grow out our program, because they will, as we see, be doing a lot more to supplement things that we as adults, as we get older, can't do. And so we're looking to try to be at that cutting edge of preparing kids for the many opportunities that will be part of their future.
Great. Peter, can you go to your page with all the sports? There are some questions on what type of sports and what programs you plan to be offering. Thank you. And then do you want to touch upon, I know you mentioned what will be sort of initially. Do you want to touch upon what you expect to start with in September of 2023?
Yeah, sure. So we'll start with hockey, figure skating, basketball, lacrosse, baseball, and esports. And we've recently added equestrian as well. We won't have any horses on campus, but there are 4 or 5 barns in the area that all have interest in, if we had 10 or 12 equestrian majors, that they would, leave campus and take the bus over to be at the barn for their 3.5, 4 hours and then come back on campus. So those are the sports we will start with. And as far as our work majors, coding and robotics and sports medicine to start, and then look to add drone and cybersecurity and a couple others after that. We will do in year 2, we will add a soccer program. We will add volleyball, wrestling. And I believe that's it right now, based on kind of what space we have on campus in the first 2 or 3 years.
Great.
Denise, if I could add one thing that I neglected in the previously when you asked the question.
Sure.
There will be multiple opportunities for summer employment for students. Typically, as we build out this program and we get to a full complement of summer camp programs, we will need people to help in a variety of areas that are sports specific, helping with dining, helping with some administrative, some after school activities or afternoon camp activities that we would plan for outside of the hours that the kids are working. So multiple opportunities. And when something like this gets built out, when it starts, there will typically probably be 100 employees who are there in some capacity between those 3 areas that I described, but only a third of them who would be living on campus.
Okay. Thank you for adding that in.
Mhm.
This is an interesting question from one of our planning board members. What do you see for off-campus needs to serve the school, its employees, students, faculty that might be living on campus? Trying to envision how much of the population of the school might wish to use services in the community. Do you envision things like restaurants would be utilized, maybe sports equipment facilities that might want to come to town? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Rich, you built out the largest one in the world. What comes with something like this?
So there are a tremendous amount of needs that all benefit the local community. And they range from, yes, students will need to go to get their toiletries someplace. We won't have a grocery store on campus for their snack food. They'll need medical services that range everything from a dentist to a physician to possibly having their ears or their eyes or other things checked. They will need a pharmacy to provide them with their medications that they take for, if they've got allergies or anything of that sort. There are also, for our purposes, the needs. My goal is always, when moving into a community and creating something like this, is to do as much of the shopping locally as we can do. So for the farms that are right adjacent to our property, that would be an area where I would look to buy all of our fresh vegetables if they could provide that from them. So we have those kinds of extensions. We have needs for getting things cleaned on a regular basis. So it may not be in Stow proper, but if there is close by a place that can do our athletic laundry for the teams, that's another use. And then just the overall general services that we need to maintain this 313,000 square foot facility. Security, cleaning purposes, maintenance on all the different equipment systems that are within this complex. Those are all areas where we would first look to how we can support the community and put dollars back into it. When parents come to town, there'll be a parents' weekend in the fall and one in the spring, similar to other independent schools. And with the sporting activities, while our space is limited to do that on any large scale, as Peter suggested, there will be reasons for parents just to come on any weekend and take their child out to dinner, maybe go to some event in the area, or if it's in the fall, we would be taking our students. I'm presuming that there are some apple orchards nearby. We would do apple picking, and we would do those things in partnership to support the community. So I've always had a relationship in the local town that we reside in to work with the recreation department, work with the local government, work with charities in the village or town to talk about what can we do to be supportive and help you, help your organization. Maybe it's the kids volunteering to do a car wash that is raising money for the local charity, not for ourselves. That's a good service component that is a very critical piece of what we do in delivering programming that helps these students be very well-rounded, very prepared for what that next step in life might be.
Excellent. Peter, you mentioned the skylight earlier for the internal dorm rooms. How will those operate, and will they allow fresh air for the kids that are staying in those dorm rooms?
Oh, that's a good question. That's an Enzo question. I don't know if Enzo's, he's our owner project manager
Let
and
me see.
is, would be the right person for that.
Is he,
Enzo.
yeah, he's not under his name. Would he be under another name?
Maybe Kerry DeLeo.
Okay, let me see. I have Carrie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, the skylights would bring in natural light, but would not be operable. But those rooms would be provided with fresh air through mechanical systems, so that we would meet all the codes required for providing that.
Great. Thank you. Oh, we have a lot of questions coming in. Do you plan to have lighting on the fields? And if so, have you studied any light spread with the abutters, or what that would impact, or how that would impact the abutters?
We'd like, one field needs to be lit. That's for sure. That's our hope. And Kerry, do you have a follow-up to the question?
Oh, did she? Wait a minute, she muted herself again. You can stay unmuted, Carrie, if you'd like.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I guess we're still in the early stages of the design, but we are aware that the town has special permits for lights, and we've already started talking with the planning department about what that entails and how that would work. And just for public knowledge, the site lighting that provides lights for those fields has come a long way in terms of throwing light beyond property lines and all that. So we're aware that we'll have to stay, dark sky compliant and all that when applicable, but still very early, I would say.
Thank you. Peter, you mentioned 385 beds and over 600 students. Does that mean you would be adding another building later on, or would the remainder of all those students be day students?
Yeah, once we hit the 385 beds, the new students coming in would be day students. That's where we would add. There's no other building. I think there's, in that phase 2 or phase 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, we'd look to, as you can find on the map here. In this area right here, 12, would be a spot where, maybe some faculty housing, might go, or some dorm space, or just leave it as a field. But that's many years kind of down the road. But ultimately, if we grew past that number, we needed more dorm space, it would have to go outside of the building that we have now. But that's 6, 7, 8 years away.
Okay, thank you. And just to confirm, your plan is to use Harvest Drive as the main access point to the campus, correct?
Is that the one? That's the existing one now?
At the lights, yes.
The long drive?
Yes.
Oh, that's the plan, yeah.
Okay. You talked about, and Rich, I think you talked about being inclusive. And I know, Peter, you and I have spoken about this, but can you talk about the possibility of having the amenities available for the community to use or rent somewhere down the line?
Yes, it's.
Sure. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rick. Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
I would just
No,
say,
no, no, I
yes.
was gonna say,
Go ahead.
we play, the school day will end at 4 or 5 o'clock. And then afterwards, we're, hoping to rent fields out, make them available to the town needs, rentals for local club programs. We want to keep the campus busy till 8 or 9 o'clock using the fields. We talked about, I was over there today for a tour. There was probably 5 or 6 different groups of people walking in with their dogs. They're still all comfortable with that. But yeah, we're, when we're done at 5 o'clock, we want to keep that thing moving. So absolutely, Rich.
Yes, in other places, I've scheduled different kinds of activities. We have I presume there are not many on this call who have actually been through that facility. So I'm going to try to explain that there are a couple of very large areas inside which can accommodate large meeting groups. There's private dining rooms that could accommodate 60 to 70 people for events that the town might want to have on that property. So the goal is to be a really good neighbor, number one. Number two, to have the residents of Stow feel like this is something that really contributes significantly to the value of the area, the value of individuals' properties, and something that they can be proud of when other people say, so tell me about MAI, that it is done with knowledge, having been through the building and see how it's being used, but also feeling that it's a comfortable space that you can come to for either events that we might host for the community or events that the community would like to host on the property.
Great. We have a number of questions that revolve around traffic. So obviously, as part of the permitting process, you will have to do some traffic plans. Have you given any thought to that now, or Rich, in your experience, what will the increase in traffic look like, or will there be an increase in traffic?
Well, I'm going to shift to Carrie because Carrie's in charge of the traffic planning piece.
Okay.
But I would say first that in terms of my experience, the traffic there is not fast moving cars, number one. Number two, there are not large quantities at any one time. When you think about our boarding population, which is what we are going to grow out first, and then the day population, picking up with that, the fact that these students will not all be on campus all day, in that they'll be going over in a bus to the NESC for their hockey component, or they might be going to the equestrian center or other locations for other sports. We should not be having large influxes of traffic at any one time that's creating congestion. And Carrie, I'll let you address, what we're doing so far with the needs for the access road coming in.
Sure. Yeah, so we haven't done any, updated traffic studies, et cetera, but what we have done is we've studied what the town had previously approved, for this facility as it related to the use that Bose had. And so what we do know is that our traffic flow should be far less than that. It's very hard to compare what's happening on that site right now because, Bose has either been in COVID, shut down and now has vacated. So yes, it will be more than there is now, but not, there's no intent for it to be, what would have been if Bose had actually occupied this building to the extent that they had permitted. And then to Rich's point, the other key differentiator is, in a 9 to 5 office building, you have a big influx at 9 in the morning and a big rush out at 5. And like Rich said, that's not really the style in which these kids will come and go. A lot of these kids will either live on campus or will have, a varied arrival and departure time, depending on what their schedule is in the sport. So there will be a traffic impact, but I think well within the realm of what had already been kind of approved or expected in the past.
For the students that are living on campus specifically, do you envision that they will have free time on weekends when they might be looking for activities off campus?
The activities off campus would be ones that we would be programming in conjunction or collaborating with outside organizations. If there was, as I mentioned earlier, things that we could do to be helpful in the community. Roads that need to be cleaned up along the side of, or parks that need to have some cleanup. Any of those things, we've done those frequently in other schools. And it's also an opportunity for people to get to know, in lots of locations, when a new school comes into the area, there is a reasonable amount of concern, maybe in some cases even fear, that this is going to be a group of kids who are not well maintained, that there are students who misbehave, or there are students who, you'd not want to see them on the street or something of that sort. And I would tell you that in my experience at IMG for 16 years, we did not have that issue. The kids recognize that they are sharing this property with someone else. They recognize that if they were to do something that was inappropriate, it's a reflection not just on them, but their family, and also on us as an institution. And we work really hard from day one to be a welcoming center for the community to come and see and experience and feel, as I said earlier, that it's part of something they can be proud of, not something that they have to be ashamed of or fearful of.
Okay, thank you. I guess along those lines, and Peter, this is something you and I have spoken about, and you mentioned it earlier, there are a number of people that take advantage of the current facility, walking around and enjoying the outdoors in that area. Can you talk about your thoughts about what that would look like when you moved into that site, and how that would work with residents liking the area to walk around?
I think it's no different than it really would be today, right? We're not going to touch the kind of walking track that goes around it, right? So that's still available. As long as there's no, student safety issues, that might arise, but people, walking around and, taking their dogs for a walk don't seem to bother anyone of us on the team. So I don't anticipate any change unless there was an incident, but I've been there now 7 months, and it just seems like, nice people walking around and getting a little exercise with their dogs. So we don't anticipate any difference.
Great, thanks.
I would just add to that, Peter, that I have another operation in another part of the country that is similar to this. And we actually have a program on property that is for community people to utilize facilities. And every day on that piece of property, we have right now about 250 people from the community who just come and get their exercise, because within the building, you can walk a mile by doing 2 laps of the building. And we open that up for that purpose. We have a cafe that we're about to open up that will provide coffee and other things for people when they're doing that activity during the day. Those are just examples of outreach to not feel that this is an off-limits place.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about the drone program and what that entails, as some people find that to be a noisy sport?
Sure. Our drone program got 3 components to it. One is teaching and licensing people to fly. For next year, there are over 80,000 spots available for drone pilots with commercial license, because of all the product that is soon to be already being delivered in Florida, in the villages, prescriptions and things by drones, because it's more efficient. It's not as personable, for sure. But one will be providing, again, people from the community can come in and get a license as well. We will be using the gym for most of that flying, not outdoors. And that's number one. Number two is we'll also be teaching the people who are wanting to be in this arena how to construct drones, and how to design payloads, because that's the bigger component of this going forward. How are we able to use them? The third component is actually looking at where these needs are going to be most prevalent. It's not simply in the things that I just mentioned, but for example, hospitals are now hiring drone pilots because in larger operations, it's more efficient to move blood via drone or to move other components that need to get from one side of a hospital to the other. They're being used in forestry for protection. Forest, as we saw in the fires in Australia, they were used to help find where animals were in trees so they could be rescued safely. So there are all those other potential utilizations that will be part of the program that we offer here. The flying that we would do outside would be on one field, probably for the winter months, as Peter talked about, the domed facility, that would be taking place in the dome. So keeping it to a minimum. And the last piece is the biggest thing that is being worked on from a research standpoint now, one of the biggest things is how to make drones quieter. And we would be participating some of that.
I would also say that I have a drone as well, and you get 20 feet off the ground, you can't hear it. So I think 80% of our drone work will be done in a gym or in a dome spot. And when it is outside, we're not talking about, drones that they're using for the US Army, right? So these are, smaller drones that, again, we can't really hear too much once they get up 20 feet anyways. They definitely won't be flying all over the town, that's for sure.
It's good to know. Can you talk about your green energy plans for the facility and the buildings, and do you have any?
Well, I know we've had a few people, out that looked, at kind of our roofs, to see if there's some sort of, solar panel work we can do there. They think there's a real opportunity with that. We haven't investigated it too much until we actually take control of the property, but they're kind of lined up, ready to talk to us about how we can get better lighting in there and change that over, as well as getting some solar panels on top of the building as well.
Rich, this is probably a good question for you. In your experience, what are some of the adjustment challenges for a community when the facility is ramping up and when they initially begin to operate?
That's a very good question. I think some of it is if you, on a Saturday, if we're taking kids to a local store, that all of a sudden there is a busload of kids coming to the store. So the adjustment is not to be fearful or something. They're coming because they need to do their shopping. Our students will be allowed to have a small refrigerator, one of them per room. So that's where they keep their own snack stuff. And that's one adjustment. I think the other piece is that all of a sudden there are going to be a lot of young people, male and female, who need their haircut. And so finding a location that's convenient to do that, because that's not something that can get done easily on a weekday for the students. At some locations, I've actually hired barbers or beauticians to come in on campus to do that, because when we realized in one particular location that it was too much to have our kids all needing to get their haircut on a Saturday, and that was a primary business day for a salon, that we then hired people to come on campus and provide that service. I think apart from that, there's not a lot of adjustments. If we do this really well, you probably, in terms of the local homeowners, won't know that there are 237 kids on that space. But in town, we try to spread it out. We don't take all the kids to one place and drop them off. We do it on a circuit usually, so that we drop some kids and then the kids get picked up at a different location, so that they are not this large herd of 45 students all coming in mass to one location.
Okay. Are you able to talk about the well water and the impact to the wastewater system in the area and how you plan to address the facility with the resources in the area?
I can probably take that one too. Yeah, so again, still really early. What we've been able to do is get a lot of information from Bose, and as part of our due diligence, have started doing calculations based on our use versus the use that was designed for that wastewater treatment plant, as well as the wells. So I can't comment on any specifics on that so far, but we haven't seen anything that would indicate that we aren't able to use the existing facilities that are there. I don't know if this group is aware, but I believe Bose had permitted to build another section of building, or another large piece of their campus that never got built, but the wastewater treatment plant was sized for the full build out. So it's pretty robust.
I believe it was over 320 or 350,000 more square feet of kind of horsepower in that plant that they've built. So every indication we've had so far is that what is already there will be able to handle everything that we're adding to it, and then some.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask Jesse or Lori to possibly answer some of these other questions. We have a lot of questions still coming in on traffic. Folks would like to know what type of traffic study will need to be done, if Stow Villages is going to be taken into consideration, the expanded traffic on Harvest Drive and what impact that will be, and if all of those things will be looked at as part of the permitting process.
Denise, if you want me to take that, I can try.
Yes.
Yeah, as far as the review of traffic, so this will come before the planning board as a special permit, and the planning board has special permit regulations regarding traffic studies that I know I've talked with Carrie and other folks at Scalar about in the past few weeks here. So though the traffic study for this kind of project would be submitted to the board as part of the application. Typically in any large application, you're going to be getting some indication of basic vehicle use, peak hour type usage, a review of nearby intersections, and the typical things you would see with that, as well as proposed mitigation measures, depending on what kind of, what the impacts of the use are. So we see those kinds of studies done on some of our bigger residential developments. This is obviously a little different. We've never really assessed a traffic study for a use like this, but we certainly have the regulations that help Masters Academy kind of navigate what is required. And it's pretty standard from what we see around Massachusetts as far as traffic studies are.
And a couple things I'll add. It does, the traffic impact study typically does include impacts to intersections within a certain radius. And it also asks that they take into account forecasting, traffic growth in the future as well. So those two things are typical. And then just so everybody understands, we would typically not only just review and assess that traffic study, but we would also have it peer reviewed by an engineer from the town.
Great, thank you. Peter, has there been any consideration for conserving wooded or open space on the property?
Well, if you look at our plans, let's see, we're not cutting anything down at all. I mean, the space where 5, 6, 7, and 8 are just fields right now. Space 9, again, it's just open space right now. 11 open space. 13 has some trees there. Again, that's phase 2. That's down the road possibly, but really I don't think we're touching much at all on the property.
Okay, great. So this question is, it's interesting. So the belief is that Mr. Odell has a lot of experience and is a valuable asset, and he might ease some of the uncertainty with people in town. Rich, are you staying on? Are you a consultant, or will you be part of this project going forward? Or maybe that's to you, Peter.
Well, I'd like to have Rich as long as I can have him, that's for sure. I've been trying to beat him up so he would be our headmaster. I'm starting to weaken him on that, but Rich will be under contract with us for 5 years. So we'll have him next year plus the next 5 after it. So we're going to have him for a good bit, that's for sure.
Okay.
I would tell you that I'll just add one thing to these.
Yeah.
I love working in small communities like this, as opposed to doing things in big cities where I have to do some of these, where some of these types of projects get developed. And because it gives us an opportunity to adopt the flavor of the community. And I mean that in a really positive way. And it's really enriching for our kids, because so many young people today do not have the opportunity to have the value structure that you see in a community like Stow. And that is a very good learning opportunity for the kids. And hopefully our kids will show that value, and hopefully you will see the value of it for the community from the kids.
Excellent. How about cars on campus? Will students be allowed to have cars, and will they be able to leave freely?
Not boarding students. The boarding students, we would, when we start this, we will not have boarding students have access to cars, other than if they live, let's say, down in Connecticut, and their parents would like them to have a car to come home when there's a vacation, then that would be an opportunity, but not that they can go on any given day. And the kids are not allowed to have their own keys. So those are kept by the security people, who have to have a permission slip signed off by the administration and by the parent before that child is allowed to leave campus in that car. Same thing for any student who does have permission, cannot take another student off campus without the same protocol being followed.
Okay.
A day student, yes, they would likely have cars on campus, but we try to limit that to just juniors or seniors. Obviously, the freshmen don't necessarily have a full driving license at that point, although I don't know the rules in Massachusetts, so maybe I'm misspeaking about that. But we would limit the younger students from having access to a vehicle on campus.
Okay. So do you envision a security gate monitoring who's driving in and off campus?
At some point, that will become a necessity, but we would like to start without having it feel like a gated community, because then, if, as we've suggested, we want the community to come in for things, we don't want to have to try to have somebody get stuck on campus because we've closed the gate, simply because they were helping clean up from some other activity. So we will need to have some security at some point, but initially, because the environment and the way the whole area feels, we'd like to try to keep it more relaxed if we can.
Have there been any studies done to compare the noise on a turf field versus the noise on a grass field?
I don't think so.
No, there's not. I mean, the difference is that the turf field gets dragged, but the turf field does not get cut. So there's not the sound of a tractor. It's usually just a gator that is pulling that to fluff up the field, the turf field.
Yeah, the sound of play would be no different.
Right.
And we've had a couple questions about the entrance in the road that's off of Old Bolton Road. What are your plans for that access point?
I don't think we've come to what we are allowed or not allowed to do with it yet. So we just haven't got there with the planning board in the town yet. So our anticipation right now is we've just been using kind of the road that has normal access at this point, and we'll talk to the town about what we can and can't do, at the appropriate time.
So those are all the questions that have come to me. I will ask if any of the other co-hosts have received questions this evening.
I think you got the only one I got. You passed that on.
None from me, Denise.
Okay. Peter or Rich, do you have closing thoughts or anything that hasn't been brought up that you'd like to make us aware of?
No, I would add, or Peter, do you want to go first?
Oh, Rich, go ahead.
As I said probably too many times during this evening's meeting, but our wish is to get the community onto campus to see, once we've got plans drawn, what we plan to do. We don't want to have there be surprises to people in the community. We hope that with what we've shared tonight and what we will continue to share, that we're an open book, and that our goal is to earn your trust and know that we are people who have done this for many years, and we feel fairly successfully, that we know most of the obstacles that lie in the path, and that we work to make them opportunities to grow the relationship rather than obstacles to the future for any of the people in the community, as well as those of us that are directly connected to what's happening on campus. And I thank you for all the questions. They were good questions, and appreciate the thoughtfulness of them.
This is great. We've been excited about this day. It means we are moving closer and closer to kind of our 4 or 5 year dream. And we're excited about all the next steps.
So I'm going to pause for a moment because a few more have come in. Just a few though. So there's some comments still on Harvest Drive and the access through Stow Villages and the easement. Have you looked into any of that, or are we still too early in the process for that?
Carrie?
We haven't looked at it, Carrie, right?
Yeah,
This is too
no.
early.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too early, but I do know that the attorneys have been, looking at all of the documentation as it relates to the ownership and the rights associated with the parcel. So I'm sure that they probably have a better handle than I do.
Can you
Was there a specific question that we should make sure they are looking into?
It was just that there's an easement. A lot of folks that I think are on here live in the villages and are concerned
Sure.
about the traffic and the impact to Harvest Drive.
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
I guess so. The main question was, does the easement that was given to Bose by HP for Harvest Drive allow for the expected traffic? That was the initial question that came in.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Again, I think Bose was estimating something like 3,000 employees or something at one point. So, but we can make sure we're ready to answer questions about that.
Great. So I guess we'll do one last question before we sort of close it up. Peter, talk a little bit about the accreditation process and what that entails for the school.
Oh, that's a rich question for sure.
Okay.
So our process with this is there is a nationally accredited organization that provides curriculum, and we will start with that curriculum being delivered in the classroom and also being supported for kids through that curriculum entity. While that starts, we will also be proceeding to get our own accreditation through the NESC. I'm sorry, not NESC, NEASC, New England Association of Schools and Colleges, which has over 3,000 institutions that are members of it, both higher ed and independent schools. That's where we will start that process. That can take anywhere from 18 months to 3 years. You have to be operating for a year before they will consider you for that accreditation. But we will proceed with that, as I'm doing with other institutions that I have around the country, to ensure that we are fully accredited, not dependent upon the other organization, which, by the way, has many, many schools around the country that are accredited by it, and also many, many thousands of students who participate in their component that's their online education. So we are well situated for that. As we get our accreditation from the New England Association, then we have a 1-year waiting period before we're allowed to enroll international students for any of the program that we will be providing. That's our schedule.
Okay, great. Can you just talk about the timeline, Peter, more for the planning board? When do you expect to apply for the permit for them?
Carrie?
Oh, wait a minute, she muted herself. Let me go back.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I
right.
keep thinking I'm done. Yeah, I mean, I think we've been talking with Jesse and getting set up to talk with other folks in town, but I think it needs to be in alignment with, you know, the masters actually being able to take ownership of the property, et cetera. And so we're trying to determine, you know, making sure that that deal is moving forward, and that will help us identify if we are going to go in for special permit prior to or just after the closing.
And then before I turn it over to for final comments, I will say we have a comment came in that said, I know that lots of folks have questions and there are many things to still be answered, but I want to say that this has been a very impressive presentation and an impressive team, and I am very much looking forward to having them be part of our community. So I think there'll be a lot of positive feedback coming from tonight. Before I turn it over to the select board chair, now any final comments before we close this out?
Right, I'm just gonna, I just want to, again, just like that last comment, really thank you, the team, Peter, Richard, Carrie. I see Ted's on the team, even though he didn't get to speak up too much. But really, your willingness to take all these questions, to give us a lot of information, really appreciated. I think it helps all of us, as we heard about it initially whenever that was, last fall, to just get a better sense of who you all are and how much work you're putting into this. So that's really exciting. Thank you. I do want to tell people, residents, that the slide deck that you're seeing is actually on the website. If you look on the town website, there's a link to it on the page that describes the project. So just Google Masters Academy from the homepage and you'll find it. So there's a ton of information there that we couldn't read it all on our small screens, but there's great information. So thank you all. Thanks all the 60+ residents that were participating. Terrific questions. Glad you all could take the time. Really appreciate it. And Jesse and Lori and planning board people, best wishes and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. All right, good night.